I'm Maryam E Clay. Aunt is a Kalkadoon, Wanji from her father's side, and I'm going to need Aunt to help me out with her mother's side.
I'm Kalkadoon Wanyi from my father's side, and Sanakwit Yimata from my mother.
Aunt was born and raised on Palm Island as a... Come on up. We're sharing this one.
Woodgaman, which means many tribe, one people, because the Palm Island community tribe is made up of 40 different tribes that were taken to Palm Island.
Thank you. The major events that shaped and profoundly impacted Aunt's life were the brutal removals of her father and siblings from their parents, brought to Palm Island under the assimilation policy, and her mother and both her parents. Her mother's family home and belongings were burnt to the ground on orders from the government after her grandfather exposed the sexual relationship between the superintendent and a young local girl at Old Mapoon. He was in balls and chains. These stories and growing up under the same act led Aunt at 13 years of drug and alcohol abuse. She stopped after entering a culturally appropriate... Yeah, what's that one? Woolgaman Community founded rehabilitation centre 3 months after her father's ultimate untimely death. Two other events that also deeply impacted Aunt's life were the removal of herself and her whole family at gunpoint by police. By orders of then Premier Joby Hockey-Peterson in 1973. And of course, the 2004 death of Aunt's brother-in-law, Mulrunji, in police custody. The events that followed at Palm Island. Ever since then, Aunt dictated her entire life to fighting for justice, equality and equity. Thank you, Aunt.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and elders past and present of this country, and elders of all the nations that are gathered here today. You have to bear with me because I still have things in bits and pieces. I couldn't bring my laptop, so I had to get the hotel to print everything out for me. I think there are a number of things that deeply impacted my life. When I was 16, my first job at Palm Island was typing up government files. And those files, the ones that I typed, I became very withdrawn and I would not open up to my parents. They kept asking me what was wrong. But they were about community women that I looked up to and loved and respected. And the files were questions about who they had sex with, where they had sex and stuff, things like that. So I became very withdrawn. So when I was about 16, I started asking my grandmother questions, my mum's mother. And she told me that I asked her how she came to Palm Island. She was moved so many times. This is our centenary year this year, and my grandmother was one of the first people brought to Palm Island from Hull River. And she told me how she was brought from her traditional homeland, Gugayimata, up near Cookdown. She was 14, she and her sister, they were tied up by the neck and they walked them for 3 months to Yarrabah. My grandmother was 14. At the end of that journey, she was pregnant. And with the eldest daughter, my Auntie Gladys, which I never ever met because she rejected her, for obvious reasons. But it made me so filled with anger. It wasn't anger, it was more rage, which led me in the first place to my 13 years down the path of drugs and alcohol. I was angry. I had no respect for any form of authority. And I was a victim of violence and a perpetrator. And it's through the grace of God that I'm standing here. My mother always said, you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword, but God had other plans for me, obviously. And when my family and I were removed from Palmer at gunpoint under the elder soap, I thought it was 11 kids in 11 years, but my sister recently got out 5 of them, the elder soap, 12 kids in 11 years. So, being born and raised on Palm Island. I was born in 1953, the year Roy Barton was the superintendent. And that was the most brutal regime known in Australia. And he left when I was about 14. So I went on this, I could say, rampage for 13 years. And just wandered everywhere. And next month I'll be 35 years straight and sober. And I want to acknowledge, Meg, thank you for creating this opportunity for us to be heard. And I want to say I'm proud of all you young people that are there on the ground every day, and the elders, Judy and Auntie, Bob. I hope when I reach 82, I'll still have a wicked sense of humour. And I'm just so proud of you. You know, you get us up every day when we don't feel like getting up sometimes. But we have to. It's all right to stay down for one day. But there were other events in the 70s also. My 3 cousins. You know, in our culture we don't have cousins, they're our siblings. My 3 young cousin brothers. Morris was 16, Gordon was 24, Toby was 28. 3 of them died within days from drinking aviation fuel. And that really devastated me. I was part of that also, but I was okay. And one uncle became permanently blinded, so there was a few things that impacted my life. But Meg sent me the topics on this conference, and I've read, and as I said, please bear with me, I've still got things in bits and pieces. And after looking at the topics for this conference, I felt I needed to go with self-determination. This word echoes reaching back over 40 years from the lists of my parents, as from others before them. I recently came across an old newspaper article from the early 70s written by my parents and other Palm Island community people. And I felt overwhelmed because they were talking about the very same thing that we are talking about at this conference and asking for the very same thing that I'm going to ask for today, which is self-determination. We need to forget about the conversations of today, such as constitutional recognition, change the date, treaty for a time, and go back to the conversation of the 70s. Otherwise, we'll be leaving this unresolved conversation for our children and their children to fix. I have lost count of the number of conferences, meetings, rallies, protests, television and newspaper interviews that I've attended, had been to since about these same very issues. Many more millions of dollars of our funding and resources will continue to be wasted and tied up in administration. And as in Palm Island, the daily FIFAs, fly in and fly outs, and all their perks. The Palm Island Community Company, which has taken over all our community-founded organisations, spends $480,000 a year just on fly-in, fly-outs. That's beside all the government agencies, the hospital and that, health experts that fly in and fly out every day. Yet every day we have medevac choppers, sometimes 4 times a day, every day, flying people to Townsville Hospital. More importantly, the overrepresentation of our people and children in the prison, mental health and welfare system will continue to increase. Suicide, domestic violence, family and community violence will also continue to increase. And I want you to understand I can only speak for my community, Palm Island, and also for the other remote Indigenous communities in Queensland. One small word jumped at me when I was looking up self-determination. That word was rest. We crave rest. I crave rest. Because we are so tired. We are so tired of being treated as children. We are so tired of burying our children. We are so tired of our children being taken into care. We are so tired of our people being imprisoned. We are so tired of trying to raise children with fetal alcohol syndrome. My daughter that I fostered, my cousin's daughter at 9 months old, she's 27 now, she has severe fetal alcohol syndrome. And she's doing well. I raised 2 children with fetal alcohol syndrome. I raised over 20 children at various times to keep them out of child safety. And the 2 with fetal alcohol syndrome, they've done more well. They've done more well than the rest of them all put together. Yes, and we are so tired. We are so tired of trying to live with mental health, domestic, family, and community violence. We are so tired of being passive bystanders, being dictated to by legislation and funding agreements. We are so tired of our ideas, hopes, and dreams, and those of our children being ignored and bashed. On Palm Island, after we had the riot, after my brother-in-law Murigi was murdered by Chris Haley, our government put in all sorts of legislations. And every time I come to Townsville shopping, which most of us have to do because the price in the state-owned store is just daylight robbery. We get searched in Townsville by police who are acting out of the jurisdiction and on Palm Island again. And as I speak now, we have people doing jail time for having full strength beer, bottle of wine or bottle of spirits, or doing community service orders. We on Palm Island also now have a whole generation under the age of 26, and they are 60% of the population of Palm Island. Palm Island has a population of about 5,000. We have 22 police officers, including 2 detectives. And there's total lawlessness on Palm Island. Who were children, small children and young teens who were brutalised and traumatised by the actions of the QPS and CERT officers during the aftermath of the Palm Island riot, following the death of Murigi. They have never received any form of trauma counselling and are self-medicating with alcohol and drugs and acting out, and some are in the prison and mental health system. Domestic, family and community violence, incarceration, mental health, addiction, suicide and attempts have risen dramatically since then. Only recently, a young boy, same as my grandson, he cut his father's throat in front of other children. And he was under mental health, but the mental health section at the hospital said he didn't need any further help. So he murdered his father only a couple of months ago. So, and he was a child too during the riot, a small child. And all these children, including my nephew, grandson, they were laid down, face down with guns, looking at lasers on their little chests and that. None of these and other issues have been addressed by any of the state and federally funded organisations in the community. This problem lies within the one-size-fits-all funding agreements and legislations. And our community-founded and based organisations have been taken over by mainstream organisations. Campbell Page, they manage the CDP program where our people have to work 5 days a week. When we ran it ourselves, they took pride in their work, but they don't have that anymore. Which takes away local jobs, community ownership, responsibility, self-determination, and culturally appropriate programs. When I entered the program, which is a culturally appropriate community founded and based program. And the 30 of us people that were in that program, we're still sober today. And at that time, we had the highest success rate in Australia. Now, with these funding agreements, there has been no success rate since. Which takes away local jobs, community ownership, responsibility, self-determination, and culturally appropriate program suited to the needs of the Palm Island community. And there's no hope for a future for young people. I wrote something on self-determination. Before colonisation, we were made of over 700 plus different tribes, each with its own language, custom, autonomy, laws, and culture. And this was respected by all other tribes without interference. And everyone benefited. This was self-determination. It worked for 70,000 years. The longevity of the existence of Aboriginal people was based on the knowledge, possession, and practice of culture. And that by being based in culture, the decision-making process was collectively accepted, as opposed to being determined by a selected few, in accordance with law as opposed to being under the discretion of the state, was developed from the grassroots community up. In white man's terminology, this philosophical framework is called self-determination, self-governance, sovereignty. By having a decision-making process based on culture, the rights of every single person was protected, and as such, society was coherent. This social coherence was disrupted by the arrival of white man/government, and when he claimed responsibility to manage the Aboriginal problem, he ignored this philosophical framework, and as such, there has not been, nor will there ever be, an effective solution to resolve the effects of colonisation and dispossession. Therefore, it is paramount that in order to restore social coherence, any initiative must be owned, managed and controlled by the Aboriginal people of the community as means of reinvesting and reconnecting to the practice of our culture. That is, returning to our system of law and governance and to our identity, and by way of culturally appropriate programs. In order for that to be effective, each community must have the right to decision making. That is self-determination and self-governance. The development of the self-determination skills is a process that should begin in childhood and should be an ongoing process to develop and meet our social, cultural, economic, physiological needs. We are now generations of a people who have come from generations of a people who have been denied this basic human right to date. The denial of this right to live according to a common set of values and beliefs, to have this right respected and supported, is at the heart of current disadvantage of Indigenous people, especially in remote communities, such as my community, Palm Island. As Mick Goddard said, we need self-determination to be authors of our own stories, not passive subjects in stories told and written by others. Self-determination will allow us to advocate on our own behalf. Self-determination will give us freedom and power of choice. That is another thing on Palm Island. We do not have a choice. We do not have a choice where to shop or anything. We just have to buy what's there. I wanted to buy a rake. It was $79, mind you. And since going to Palm, I became malnourished. And I recently had to have iron infusion, which is regular occurrence on Palm, and a lot of people have it. And a course of vitamin B12 shot, because you can't even buy a week's worth of grocery in that store. Self-determination. Self-determination will allow us to advocate on our own behalf. Self-determination will give us freedom and power of choice, motivation, independence, ability, and rest. The start of this journey will depend on the leadership of each community. The journey from that point on will largely be shaped by a partnership that we can create, and one that I hope we can forge today. Create and build with you and other external partners to lobby the state and federal government on our behalf to remove structural and systematic impediments in funding agreements, legislations, which makes achieving any community-owned solutions difficult and impossible. There will be no equality unless there is equity. The right to self-determination is the right of people rather than of individuals. A life of opportunity and dignity free from discrimination and disadvantage should not be an ideal. It is, in fact, a basic human right. We should be involved in the development and implementation of policies that impact on us daily, and with dialogue, consultation, engagement strategies that facilitate this. In Section 3 of the Act, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Act in 2005, it states that the objective of this Act include to ensure maximum participation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander persons in the formulation and implementation policies that affect and promote the development of self-determination. We need to go from community crisis in our lives to community control. This is what our life is made of one time. It's gone from one crisis to another. Self-determination will allow us to advocate on our own behalf. If government partners apply these principles, they can shift from a service delivery paradigm to becoming enablers and facilitators of community-owned and based change. Responsibility, actions, and solutions must be owned by our communities. I'm just reading by the notes now. As I said, I haven't got it all together. All peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine status and freely pursue them. Access to critical service is a key component to equality. And as I said, we can't have equality unless there's equity. The most powerful tool to help build good constructive relationships, equality, human rights, and a level playing field are reciprocation, understanding, dialogue, tolerance, acceptance, trust, and respect. Thank you.